Standardized testing is a facade that prioritizes the test which requires tutoring and inaccessible to the poor students. Colker. 19. Exams reduce best degree testing subject non-status would be easier. Testing to income of a hand of score than rather than overcome lack approach on the exams often take optimal methods, placement of competitive disadvantage, absence of scores against often scores below the medium. The list that tests optimal chance of universities brief on the importance of student exams with the scores report the ranking system. Universities is mindful before the test report helping maintain a rank. Standardized testing to be able to exclude qualified minorities in favor of rich whites. Carnival. At all 18, the vast majority of black Latino students overall. Anyone trying to overfund open access college closure, meaning lottery racing, cost inequality behind scientific facade, 2014, 341,000 black, and 2015, short of average, only 90% of selected college 31% white students attend active merit is another affirmative action for white privileged whites. Selected public college spending three times as much for student. What money buys is much larger higher ratio rate to access to middle class income. The combination of racial integration, whitening disparities, gas federal race cap. Standardized testing doesn't influence graduation rates enough to outweigh the rampant inequality of fosters. Carnival. PCA 18. Test scores between 15% of variation graduation rate to students who are just above average has 79% chance to graduate students in the top quartile. 85% of black students including non-cognitive measures for these gaps into our predicted test score. Performance between black Latinos who succeed in black colleges and are now getting in. Black Latinos who graduate the same white students to top your colleges much higher if they attend open access college. Selective colleges are critical for minority graduation. Carnival. PGA 19. Black Latinos to top lower media SAT scores once and SAT puts students at disadvantage even though test results. Meanwhile, the succeeding college black Latinos students score above 1,000 has an 81% chance of graduating to college and only 46% chance of open access college. The impact of cycles of poverty and poor education. Carnival. PGA 18 separate on equal public college system increase earnings disparity towards praise black Latino disparity education with national scary for every dollar. Oh, white workers, black over 76 all workers see huge earning from completing bachelor's degree earning greater after their degrees. Plan in the United States college and universities ought not consider the SAT and ACT in undergraduate admission decisions. Minorities are more likely to be GPA discrepancy means the plan increases diversity sanctions PhD and matter 18. There has been a remarkable consistent data range between more likely to be J2 lady currency students where our GPAs and test scores tend to be female minority, low income only, a small percentage minority, and low income students come to the high city and moderate GPA group. GPA discrepancy students more likely to have low socioeconomic status and GPA SAT discrepancy. Hampshire occurs the opposite phase 1 increases diversity. Our evidence is reverse causal lash. MHAD 15 week big outcomes well. Academic experience as for interviews, recommendations, communicate entrepreneurship, overarching narratives, motivation, discipline, capacity, self reflection. GPA measure performance or willing to course in time response diversion to 31% from 21% percentage of students who are first generation 1 12 18 without scores every other detail became more complete picture than we'd seen before. The absolves anxiety caused by test Harlow Peachy 19 home time relations from homes and activity of knowledge of potential anxiety illustrates ongoing problems and factors affect exam for art. Well, we want to measure current standards every single large scale application of computer science technology and look for incentive to help adapt science to spend decades. A mapping of the precipitation teams needs to build long-lasting memories, identifying common purchase which or retention private ACT and ACT. The ACT and ACT matter as long as the learner tools and data continue for the shift in the real test would be to attract long-term knowledge. And understanding, eliminating standardized test deals with significant blood education inequalities and now PG18. The SAT and ACT epitomizing true determination, vested in integral purpose, and more ways to prefer the status quo not successful national movement to eliminate zero assessment administration would strike a blow against proven equality, justice, no long-term reform, do one first by eliminating greater disparate access, affordability, second by fostering or informing diversity and intelligence, life experiences, productivity, same thing, leading in the right direction, and entire social change. The plan results in more rigorous application that boosts the effectiveness of admission decisions become PC. 18 when the college exam distinguished themselves and makes it easier for students to identify that the trends been much as applications become harder to weed through them, so predict the good application goal overall leaders, rule anti scores close and identify what inequalities make students successful, conquer application to identify this in the school, may see decrease in alpha yield increase, prefer specific evidence becoming PC can gap in the literature because the research on test also not supplying the following study. Well, bridge the gap by investigating Hampshire, the only test by institution. Framework, the standard is maximizing expected well-being for weighability, only consequences between degree drawing side, breaking promise media for lunch, not as bad breaking promise to get. Guiding person also only consequences between whether the second is so much from the first, only intuitions outweigh their foundational weight. Superior argument theories are contrary from false, even if candidate operator. Only second is accurate. After specificity, when aggregation, every policy benefits on farmers, others ultimately the side tradition. Free action people into intent foresight, exchange when you foresee a consequence, you intend the consequence of the curve. For example, I throw my timer options black and white also feeds the first either the laptop falling into his hands and hurting machines are also responsible for that consequence. Under B. 1. Ongoing balance, outweighs Jackson. 12. We've been told about big threats with 1 big content after from poverty, inequality, structural loss, market debt, from lack of health, terrorism, Iran, North Korean computer hackers, media, spend more time talking about threats and likely to affect the media, threats, some thoughts, some security measures, which have an impact on these stocks, community threats are really serious, rules are hoping you don't increase, you don't notice increasing inequality, domestic violence skills, poverty, and preventable disease skills, consequently terrorists is more exciting than tourism, how poor people discriminate against. Second, 1 year theory, point the active, otherwise negative. If it would be to make it impossible, B1 is drop the rate or short, 1 year from based on time and assent. On 3, valid applications are key, C point no rate, they can stick me. 1 6 answer short are going to make the shooter impossible, D1 is competing in terms of 1 year terms. Or not bi-directional day shift, defender in the day more time. After theory first, it's much more to choose both only. If 1 4 1 year, 1 2 1, you probably more abuse and devoting that much more time. Fairness because we see the given neutrality, education gives supportive tools for life and research thinking. Third, debate about standardized testing is valuable. Students entering college have the capacity to influence university policy. I'm a senior candidate. 19 situation know how they clear the issues. And recently the ASUC Senate passed a resolution students will white to standardized testing as undergraduate commission requiring the movements how students change history, practically change the future ones. Give higher education. 4, respecting the subset is good. 8 is all colleges. All tests is about model because they will have specific offense and each one is differently. and non-specific dates and no program equal and options or terms definition of test recorded by colleges with regard to vocational schools, etc. See point upon generic suspect helps you think of and adapt which is key to utilizing real skills in your situation. 5 reasonable life insurance when there's multiple change terms I can next read like expected. Spec out the alpha 12 value for interpretation default substance always top get unique to resolution for 2 months of vehicle. There's only 4 minutes and 1 year generate office interchange way while covering substance reasonable life insurance allows to actually get education. Still have quite a bit of time. I'll send these cards after. Test have a massive gender bias. Hacker, PHA 16, center assessing setting women back, women are unlikely to some women. Give a reason each year more weight. See to that 16 you see the happiness of messaging mathematics stores reflecting cost engaged growth on aggregate current 31 point deficit. 32 points digital Georgia plays often complex test assignments which results in higher grades positive partner. Can solve the multiple testing keys. Just successful coordinate impulsive keys. Raising confidence equal for the entire enterprise and more. Men who are willing to talk to schools and really competition made the SC scores at least 700. Machine grade testing is so much all we get is tinkering. The debate should center around. Actually, yeah, that's fine. I'll send that last one. I'm just going to paste it at the bottom.
It's just that one.
Yeah. Send. Give me a second.
Good.
Yep.
What is the terminal impact of the app?
Poverty.
Cool. So, does income inequality also sort of matter?
Well, that's not a direct impact of the app.
Alright. So, how does the plan resolve poverty? Like,
obviously we don't claim to resolve like the entirety of poverty, but
Sure.
our impact evidence talks about how like graduating from college with a bachelor's degree, graduating from more selective colleges, etc., is more likely, or like it makes it more likely people earn higher wages. Our internal link evidence talks about how people are more likely to graduate from selective colleges, which impact terms mismatch.
Who are the people that the app like brings in that aren't going to college right now?
Predominantly people who are in poverty or are minorities.
So
likely
people, minorities, those are the people that the app would bring into college.
What?
Low-income people, minorities, those are the people the app would bring into college.
That is the majority of people who would be most affected by the affirmative. Obviously, it would have like fringe effects on like other people too, but
yeah,
that is the majority population affected.
All right, great. Let's talk about why are tests biased?
Why are tests biased?
Is it just score disparities?
That is one warrant. There's also some arguments about how standardized testing is used by colleges and universities in their consideration to exclude qualified minorities. So it's not just the score disparity, but rather how colleges use it.
Okay, why does score disparity prove bias?
Why does score disparity prove bias? Because there's statistical evidence that shows that standardized tests are biased against people who, against people who are of lower income or like different racial or socioeconomic status.
Okay. Detail. So just like anything that maximizes the most amount of well-being, what would outweigh under this? Like would existential threats outweigh? Would smaller level impacts outweigh?
Doing.
Well, I want to know what the stance of the 1AC takes on because you read it standard.
Well, obviously the underview had a part that talks about how like we should focus on ongoing violence rather than large threats.
Okay. And so why does that maximize well-being more than large scale impacts?
Because we have done the evidence talks about how large scale impacts like terrorism or like Iran, North Korea, computer hackers, like all of these are things that are spectacularized by the media to distract people from like
so if those impacts were true, would they be a larger loss of well-being than just poverty?
I mean, depends on like what happens as a result of the impact.
If those, like you mentioned, like terrorism and nuclear war, if those like sort of large-scale impacts occurred, would they be a bigger impact than poverty?
You can do weighing as to why that
no,
might be true.
you just like asserted like an impact claim about weighing. I want you to answer the question.
Well, I have made a claim as to why the impacts of the affirmative outweigh the impacts of say like
in this hypothetical, under your framework, would that outweigh? Just this hypothetical. Like if they were true, would terrorism and nuclear war outweigh?
Not guaranteed you can do weighing.
Alright, I'll send it out. It will be the It will be 4 off in the case in the order of the underview and then the advantage.
Thanks. Are you leaving right now, have you?
No, like in a couple hours.
4 off the case. Yeah.
What's the order on case?
It'll go to underview, or like the sort of the third page, whatever, and then the advantage, like where the majority of the cards are. Alright, send.
He'll let you know when I get it.
Yep.
Just got it. Give me a second.
Good?
Not yet. It is opening. And the split screen. Good. Now I'm good. Judges. Okay.
First off is the counterplay tax. The United States federal government should raise the top bracket tax rate to 50%, the capital gains and dividends tax rate to 30.4%, reduce the income distributed by more than 50% through redistribution. That's Aaron 15, increase in the top tax bracket from 39.6% to 50%, increases 10%. The equalizing effect of the current tax system of the current the effect of distributing the revenue would lower inequality by 20%, increase in the top bracket rate would be combined with raising the tax on capital gains and dividends. The tax are applied to capital gains and dividends would go by the same amount to 30.4%. These changes would boost revenue by $2 trillion over 10 years. If that revenue was distributed to the bottom 20% rate, increases combined with transfer would lower the income ratio 110%. The gap between incomes of people at the 99th and 10% will become almost in half. It resolves all their poverty impacts. Obviously, if you redistributing more well to the bottom half of the populace would make their standard of living better. Next off, interpretation. The affirmative must defend that college universities ought not consider any standardized tests. Ought not. The resolution means prohibition. Chapter 92 judgments about what ages ought to do, equivalent to what they are morally prohibited from doing. Test specification violates no plausible reading, allows their interpretation. Evil 19, the resolution sets on the resolution means college universities ought not consider any standardized test engagement by essential. Statement is a universal statement of colleges ought not consider standardized test means colleges ought to consider at least one of the sentence colleges ought not consider test would mean that colleges ought not consider no standardized test. Consider colleges and universities ought not consider standardized tests. Colleges and decisions of college and universities ought to consider standardized tests and decisions. This statement expresses a contradiction, but it should sound perfectly consistent. This shows our resolution cannot be interpreted that allows for specification of testing of all the variables were essential. This onus is on the affirmative to explain why this sounds contradictory. There is other interpretation is possible. A is for station. Our interpretation was grammatically correct. The reading of the resolution. Any one error counter to define words of the resolution. Otherwise, their interpretation is arbitrary, unpredictable, and requires interpretations which cannot predictably guide your own purposes. Completely subjective. That outweighs because all after lines is all offenses rely on two sides having a common understanding to limited and rather dozens of standardized tests like IB, SAT, TOEFL, AI, CE, PSAT, AP, and HiSET. The list goes on. The combinations of these apps are limitless and allow them to cherry pick the best round, which alters the structural alters debate because core negative ground should be some testing good limits proceeds education because it can't be actualized. No way to dig them or time to correct calculate voting. Issue tells the net what they should do and do not have to prepare for a debate. This game that requires fairness and education, which terminal impact to the activity, drop the debate or anything else separate. Next strategy, complete interpretation of reasonability is arbitrary invites to intervention and cause a race to the bottom specifically on takes matter what you justify. You don't RBIs afterwards to be teams for substantive education reject their reasonability arguments. They're on one-sided bidirectionality. 241 error theory talk as an operator stock issue and demarcates the bounds of the resolution from being gap is in top goal means the debate should never happen in the first place. Very whining about time is relevant. Next off, status quo affirmative action policy is allowed, but only if it constitutes a small part of admission decisions. The emphasis and standardized test makes it more prominent, sparks lawsuits. Joshi 19 affirmative action will survive by going further on underground and Fisher. Texas courts uphold race-sensitive admissions policies, race and indirect faction to make it a difference. The emphasizing standardized test scores to retreat from test doctors could be a new form of affirmative action, moving away from standardized tests likely to resentment, including those resources to prepare for tests and those who sense variance and worth the attention ability to succeed in test doctors. Affirmative action actors start having such resistance every lawsuit challenging admission reform scope. The next chart, unclear affirmative action policy clogs the courts. Body 77. The forces that work here are complex. It would almost be as bad to drive it underground. There are those who believe that that's what pretended not to accept it and to achieve a real minority presence by asserting assertively neutral means that it's not at all likely that it could find ways of referring minority candidates. Destruction of subterfuge hard to imagine likely cause the courts unmanageable, massive, complex complaints and court efficiencies. Key to patent protections. Ball 10. Courts are a crucial part of the patent system. Inventors can protect those rights through patent infringement suits, and the courts and alleged infringers have the right to challenge approvingly granted patents and have them declare the management of a court has an impact on parenting and research, the promotion in promoting innovation with efficient court system, any delay or cost in clarifying rights-based slow innovation. Specifically, IPRs can prevent a disease. Reinhardt 14 through research and innovation. Methods for dealing with disease will be found. These endeavor will be expensive. Firms who face high risk patents are important. Solving problems will require R&D operations assurance takes place. That's an existential risk handling. And Armstrong 15 that the disease have been greater than the greatest cause of mortality in history. These are heavy tailed. The majority will die from seeing the largest pandemic with such a greater probability than usually assumed. All the features exist in nature. Incurable, fatal, extremely infectious, long incubation periods of pathogen combined. The death toll will be extreme. All the world would have changed, making past comparisons problematic. Monitoring, transporting to population loss. Infections spread rapidly. Ripple effect will include political and ag disruption, economic dislocation, damage, trade, extinction is possible. If the epidemic fragments to human society to the extent that recovery becomes impossible. Next off, rural student graduation rates are low now, primarily due to lack of standardized testing, boosting graduation rates, least brain drain. Down to 19, the rural grads less likely to head off to college or areas in cities. 40% for rural, 29.3%. Most students in suburban areas took a college admissions test study found that teens in rural districts were less likely to do so. Some who would have scored high enough to qualify promising students to take the test would have put them on the path to other campuses. A new study found gaps in college attainment, but directly we can no longer overlook the role of placing who has access to college. 92% of bachelor degree recipients live in urban areas. Rural families where if they send their children to college, they'll move away manually because they can't find lucrative work study. Found that graduates in rural areas on low wages and counterparts to city studies cite the preponderance of low-paying jobs and low-skilled jobs in the rural areas, and that collapses food security during 13th century. There's less demand for services. Great jobs as rural parts that continue to prosper. The struggle to find a way to make rural America enticing. Rural America still matters to the way nation's well-being. In this country, where food is abundant, taken for granted. Suburban and urban fates are tied to rural America. Farmers and lawmakers strongly disagree with Bill's tax and also declining of rural America with political power. Demand for rural farmers and merchants point to the food they produce as evidence of ongoing important. That's the most likely cause of global conflict. Lahane 17, the worth of the 21st century involve failed states, rebellion, civil conflict, and insurgencies and terror. All these will be triggered by resources given the interconnectivity of food security and political instability. Food is likely to act as especially in the Middle East and elsewhere. Improving food security is critical to secure global environmental resources continue to contribute to a rising cycle of violence. Improving food security reduces conflict. Likelihood of violence is exacerbated by security is growing difficult to address food diplomacy or other force the underview. Extinction outweighs Whittlestone 17 to prevent an issue of positive future for humanity. Working to prevent extinction risk and civilization continuing for 10 billion years. Lost potential will be enormous. We end up with a negative trajectory. Tends to shape long-term future and neglect by governments. There's little incentive focus on powerful certain issues. Future generation matter with the camp of all the space side. Future generation are more certain than abstract temporal discounting give less weight to outcomes of the future. The increase in the probability of extinction of 1 in a million could result in 10,000 years of expected civilization and all orbit, making for a period twice as good. Decreasing extinction will be 100 times better. And 100 times better. War-term structural violence. It results in scapegoating minorities, which turns all their offense default neg on wing. They shifted way too much in cross-examination. You should not encourage that because it's deficit strategy. The Jack Simmons prefer specific internal links. Quality of qualified authors and study specificities and experts outweigh B's that turns kids prove that we're better for bread and poverty. Poverty. Let me reply to new applications of spikes in the 1EC. I don't know the logical implication of the argument. If the linking effect during the 1EC, I can't respond because I don't know how the spike will be applied. Let's say I can respond to parts in the app, but that doesn't make sense. If I know the exact violation or what mechanism it links back to, and too late the win on these flippy arguments for allows for terrible front loading and tricks debates. Off-specking subsets A off their A point we lead to better debates because generics off their B point. That doesn't happen under our interpretations and benefits and definitions. Check their model off their C points. Generics won't link in the first place, and you ask solve the impact of thinking on your feet. The advantage off their last one coming card. This card is terrible. Just descriptive. Same in the literature. And there's not much lit on top. Not a comparison argument. Education can't reduce speed. Income breathing. 14 education not delivery quality. Finless system is extremely egalitarian. Quality of poverty is not on time. No feeling shows not for everyone to hold jobs. Our part is hold jobs.
Timer went off at high. Okay, cross execution.
Yep.
Extinction first, what's the warrant?
So a couple of things. First is that the loss of future generations would be so much, considering that a civilization could continue for an inordinate amount of time on the scale of 10 billion years, that we should not compromise future
talk about
civilizations.
this court clog stuff.
Yeah.
So you're saying the app would lead to affirmative action lawsuits, which would clog the courts.
Yeah. So
why do current affirmative action lawsuits not clog the courts?
So there's not enough. So it's sort of the issue is resolved because it's a small amount of lawsuits. What?
there's definitely like.
I agree there are
Controversy
cases now,
over
but
it.
the scope isn't large enough in the status quo because there's sort of clear precedent on affirmative action is allowed if it's a small part of admissions decisions, right? The Act A makes it sort of confuses the process of admissions and increases the influence of affirmative actions, which sort of massively increases the amount of lawsuits from
Okay, wait, so
from
increased
backlash from rich
affirmative
parents.
actions leads to massive lawsuits. Why would there be a number of lawsuits about the same thing? Wouldn't one decision resolve it?
Well,
that's like
no,
how
because
precedent
think
works.
about it. Against every single college, based on like every single test, there's so many different combinations
Wait,
and
what's
possibilities
every
for
single
lawsuits.
test? The app only ends at SAT and ACT.
Okay, still every single college. I mean, there's a scope for a lot of different warrants for a lot of different colleges and different legal reasonings for each of those, which means the potential scope for the number of tests is ginormous. There'll be like they can like hire a bunch of like high-priced fancy
Okay,
lawyers.
that's
who will
fine.
look
Let's talk
for
about this
abstruse legal
rural
reasoning, so it
workers thing.
varies.
Why would okay, why is the app sufficient to cause brain drain?
Right, so the act is sort of a massive, I mean, this is from like the act inequality impact. So the act massively increases the amount of low-income students like a large chunk of that comes from rural students because rural students are
Why
predominantly
doesn't
the ones.
industrialization check like industrial ag where they have like machines?
So the argument is that because it tanks sort of the rural economy, it undermines the ability for like any of these economies and farms to function. Yes, there are large-scale industrial farms, but those happen in the heartland and rely on like surrounding like economic productivity. Otherwise, it just like the sort of ability to
food
produce
insecurity,
breaks down.
why is it unique to this?
What do you mean?
Why is food insecurity unique to like this?
What is this?
Or like your link?
I mean, if the plan sort of shoots like the rural economies in the back, if there's no way for them to sustain that sort of like development and food production, then it just results in a large amount of food insecurity because the U.S. is the largest exporter of food like globally, and just generally the like rural economies and rural food production provides the vast amount of like food for sort of the rest of America.
Okay. 5 minutes. Status of the camp line?
Additional.
Cool. What was the last McCubbin card?
The answer on McCubbin, it was just like the card like just describes there's a lack of literature, but it's not an F comparison, and like it's just like a bad card.
Okay. Wait, was McCubbin the test optional card?
It was like the card about the like prefer our test test line specific credits.
Which courts will get clogged? Like, I want you to like name courts, like circuit courts, Supreme Court, etc.
I mean, they proceeds from the bottom up, so they go.
Okay, do you have any
like
evidence that says these will go up?
Our evidence says it will clog the courts and suits will massively increase.
Okay, that's.
Like, what else do you want? I'm very confused by the question. Our Bundy evidence says it will clog the courts with an
That's
unmanageable
fine.
mass of complex
That's fine, Akshay,
complaints.
thank you. What patents are like in the courts for disease right now?
I mean, well, patents. I mean, it's R&D, right? So they're not like
That's
publicly reporting what. Like, I'm not like in
Thanks, Akshay.
like the biotech firms, and I don't know what they're developing. The point is that protecting patents is key because they need to be able to release those drugs.
Cool.
I don't have like inside info. Sorry.
It'd be illegal.
Exactly.
stop for 149 one. It's T, then the case, the advantage counterpoint, then the core clog disset, and then food security for cards, sending them now. It's just the advantage, I think. It'll briefly be at the extinction outweighs stuff.
Can you see the order one more time?
T case, on case it's like the Finland thing, then slash the advantage, and then the under review extinction, advantage counterpoint, core clog, food security, sending this now. Send. Actually, wait, let's read. Continue. Start for 136. Same stuff. Just writing some stuff out. Ever good?
Use before like the cord clog.
In the dock, yeah, I'll flip it.
Okay.
Okay.
Read it.
I meet their no standard test other than the ACT or SC, no new turn violations. It's far too late because the tutor doesn't get you. I mean, project interpretation for Norman Dewey, coach, evidence, incentivize writing for students and supporting ideological meanings, semantics, and density. It's just for the anti-point agenda, counter the options, specified test, apply specification, carry on, you have to give for your personal library, for defense, something for the normal process, so community theory, from ways that benefits one topic, a different test, a different purposes, effects, consideration, which are determines about the topic, one second, after identifies all tests, and SATs are different from the GED or trouble picks, source, and aspect of next, how generous like text optional, but in case of how many versus fixed precision, one pragmatic check, like high schools or graduate tests, which topic of because they're qualitatively different, they'll limit says that second, qualified topic of your research on grammar dictionaries, which are semantics for the purpose of limits are carrying makes semantics relevant. There's a chance for the topics are often four new 200 semantics first wasn't the ones you wouldn't pragmatic source get defense sufficient to confirm limits. One functional limits inherent to undergrad advantage all checks multiple politics large case because it's a stupid topic. It doesn't have an impact. Second turn your over limit more than the topic of an avenue strategically your model limits it down to a couple of 30s yes for any things like test good test optional reform counterpoints NCSK the 1 and 2 proves 4 turn their intermediate shift yes record from the 1 year program counterpoint shift that that's our interpretation key the absence defense stable mechanism reasonability voting negative price sacrifice and substance abuse and chance always abuse voting on their terms arbitrary right and free. There's a transfer marking generosity of all the time we talk to rule which works identified pronoun phrase reports precision of 20%. The case standard assessing your bias and provide minorities for accessing higher education impact of cycles inequality and earning disparities. The SAT and ACT use reading common grammar sections that rely on white experiences and vocabulary sections from things like from like SAT reading comprehension sections. We have a unique warrant that the advantage counterpoint doesn't solve. If Finland they didn't get through enough of the warrant, the extinction stuff. Well, if we win the analytics on the dissent, then after that we've reduced the risk of the dissent enough that you can vote affirmative on. The case outweighs the counterpoint permutation due to the permit. The counterpoint doesn't solve the poverty as a result of low education, but graduation rates also influence those wages, and we articulate in a benefit that they don't solve the core clog stuff. One, Harvard versus SFFA thumbs. There's a major controversy in the school right now, especially because of the college admission scandal, which means that if any kind of core clog is going to happen, it's already going to happen because the quote case. Second is precedent check. This case will determine others. Local courts are relevant because the important patents and the ones that will check disease will go up to higher courts. Third is that there's no evidence that there are patents in the courts reduced right now. You should err affirmative because we solve an impact right now, but there's loads of other intervening things that will resolve their impact. Four, their link evidence is from 1977. It's the context of things that happened in the past, but we have new policies now, like affirmative action. 5, patent courts already are clogged and they don't handle criminal cases, they don't handle these cases. U.S. courts. 14, filings of from others than 12%. One case may become multiple 60% of the caseload. Delaware's per judge weight caseload second highest. We're averaging about 7 cases per patent. It's hard to be able to maintain your current disposition rate with patent cases. Patents are horrible for innovation masking. 8 annual novels can be good lowest fine increases cost. That's true with patent more innovation. That's happening with your patent list fears. Copy products by James and inventor are overwhelming competition is a good thing. Market economy innovation doctrine process parts are unlikely to come from the other hurdles. Researchers patents slow down innovation. Clogging the system creates the potential for change. Robbers 13 misdemeanors and lower criminal courts for processing samples and individuals with arrest records quickly refusing to process quickly replace the real cost of the system grant for help place the burden of mass misdemeanor processing on the court of prosecution. Lawyers may act to reduce the cost of misdemeanor policing. Prosecutors access discretion. The food security just had one. There's no internal link. Other countries check. They have no evidence as to why the U.S. is the linchpin of global food security. There's a lot of other third world countries that do a lot of the food things, etc. I.e., rice coming from other countries. The only thing the U.S. produces like corn in Iowa and tobacco in North Carolina. The second is the industry checks mass agriculture. The shift towards mass agriculture and industrialization and the specialization of workers and increased urbanization are all causes and reasons as to why things in the scope check food security. Those are kinds of urbanization will result in things. Third is scope. So also on purpose sustainable agricultural stock. 14 out of 9 is expected to make stronger than used 2015 cities and cities provide more incentives, some more so from receptive fuels to follow operations, improve profitability, concern grant for local food growth remain strong. The conference for sustainable in 2015 world government incentives to ladies policy change, opportunity to tech improves financing, becoming more available profits are being utilized, proves tech is improving and solves their offense. Global food systems are stabilizing to show up. 14 in 2013 investors looking for food companies that help the sector gain to a 22% gain for the year. Effort factors are winning in food stocks favor stable prices. Global commodity price may be near that of an upward trend. Result in price stability could boost food markets profits. So low sensitivity interest rate changes food stocks companies affected by higher interest rates because demand for food stays relatively upon it. Food shortages don't cause war. LG 11 empirical studies not supporting any argument. Second, capital increased productivity. Humankind has reached repair the team. On talk about alarmist scenarios including future wars. Food and foreign ministries is describing the various and extensive database on cause of war, short water. 80% of the doing things were loaded. The rhetoric case always all their impact. They completely dropped the advantage. If we have 100% food link and reduce the decided enough, then that's the reason why you should vote for him.
Are there any theoretical reasons to reject the negative?
Nope.
Right. No RBI?
Nope.
Right.
Or wait. No.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. But just check.
I was checking to see if I said reject the team or enter.
it'll be the rural schools dissed, the core plug dissed, or actually the counterplan, then the core plug dissed, then the framework page. There's like one card, I'll just send it out to the body page now.
So, food, counterpoint for clause case.
Yeah.
Yeah, here.
Can you just paste it in the body so I can
Yeah,
copy
I'll
paste
paste
it
it.
in the body?
Is that good?
Yep.
Yep.
I didn't get the card yet. Just got it, one second. Okay, I'm good.
The disset reason turns case 8 is magnitude where the most likely scenario for escalation. Only food security goes nuclear. Evidence compares to every other risk. Wars in the 21st century won't be between states, but between rogue actors, failed states, and rats, which are all more likely to escalate. And only food is approximate cause, but it's also a conflict dampener, which solves the apple that populations don't want to go to war. And it also reminds there are much. It also reduces sort of the impacts of inequality in the first place because because of the sort of impacts that poverty has on death and quality of life are because you can't afford to get food, which means it results sort of the terminal to their to the terminal impacts of their app. Anyways, it's the Lehane evidence. All this impact out was in the 1 and Z in the 1 year drop. Didn't know to a recovery. Prefer carded impact out because everything else or anything else reports bad spin over evidence and evidence over research. Second, or prefer it over their Alush evidence. Their Alush evidence is outdated from 2011. It's also about water wars and not food wars. You should prefer our evidence because only it takes into account latest trends within food supply and demand and emerging international actors that are most likely to result in sort of war escalation. Second, probability or dissent is uniquely likely. Now farms are thriving. Our farms are thriving according to our Doring average, which means there's only a plan. No risk the plan that the plan kills. The third is time frame food. Wars escalate extremely quickly because of competition. Different countries have to compete for new sources of food, which means conflict is much more likely to escalate. And there's an intensity warrant there because it's so integral to it's so integral to the security and well-being of the country that they're more likely to do anything in order to sort of gain access to that food. D is that it turns the case. A point is that a lack of food definitely worsens definitely worsens poverty because literally if no one has food, then the price of food skyrocket, and then no one can afford it, which worsens the impact of poverty. Even if the app increases income, it doesn't matter because no one can afford the basics of survival. Second is that war turns structural violence. You can see this on the case page, but war inevitably results in scapegoating of different minority groups because they will be blamed and they will be blamed for the preponderance of war as it inevitably gets layered with sort of like classist and racist implications. So the line by line, they say U.S. not the linchpin. The U.S. is the linchpin. It's the largest exporter of food, which means you should which means it's uniquely likely to spill over. They don't have any cards on this war. You shouldn't look to it. Second is that it does solve global food security. Its flowers. 18 U.S. has long been a leader in access to innovations that flow from to the rest of the world. In poor countries, these help farmers do more with less. U.S. safeguards against future threats, bolster resilience and productivity around the world. Second, they say industry checks. A, it doesn't check. We resolve industry because they've conceded that most of the food production happens in the heartland anyways, which means all the industrial farms happen and work in the heartland, and they conceded. And so that means our impact sort of result or sort of this is just another internal link booster for our dissat because it takes out the efficacy of industrial ag in the first place. I guess I'll do sort of this level of the dissat here. We've conceded that they massively increase the number of students low-income students who come into universities. The problem is most of that is actually rural students according to our 1 and C evidence. That means that they massively increase the amount of rural branch area because the kids who are leaving to go to college never return, which decimates the amount of the economy of rural places and the production of food because it reduces sort of aggregate demand and consumption within economies because they're they're sort of the breadwinners that are more likely to spend on consumer goods and drive demand throughout the entire economy. That sort of spills throughout rural economies, which undermines the influence of rural places and the amount of food production that they can do, which inevitably which spills over sort of globally and causes our war impacts. Now, the cards they read, they say squo solves are. They say off the sort of first card they read, this card does not say anything. All it says is that they're sort of low. It asserts that there's some urban agriculture, but that is not large. But that isn't large enough that isn't large enough in order to solve for the broader food supply. They've conceded only our evidence outlines that the rural areas are the vast majority rural areas are the vast majority of existing food production. Their evidence to make a comparative claim. It just says urban growth is up a little, but that doesn't matter. The second Schwab card, our argument is about aggregate supply of food, not aggregate demand, which means it doesn't matter if the stocks are going up because the plant tanks their ability to be profitable anyways. This is just uniqueness for the dissent. They say, Lucia, I did that work above on the line by line. Now, the top of the counterplan solves the entirety of the case. They can see that regressive tax policies, the root cause of income inequality, allows the massive accumulation of wealth at the top of 50% at the expense of redistributive policies, raising the top bracket income tax to 50% and the capital gains tax to 32.4%, reduces inequality more than 50%. That was the Aaron evidence. It resolves the terminal to inequality because it massively redistributes income to anyways, which means to everyone, which means they can afford higher quality of life. But the permutation do both links to the dissets because we solve the terminal. The link to the disset is increasing sort of rural access to these schools. The counterplan resolves inequality without doing so because it's sort of it's at a later stage, which means the counterplan doesn't link to the net benefit, but the permutation would. The court clause said, well, concede that precedent checks. There's no. That means there's no link. It takes out whatever offense they have in this makes a framework flow. They would basically concede our Whittleston evidence. It says that first is that extinction must outweigh because there's a sort of near infinite number of future generations that is enormous amount of value. Our evidence does the math. It says even if you prevented all war, that preventing extinction would still outweigh. It also says that you're cognitively biased against sort of the probability of extinction because it seems far out, which causes temporal discounting, which means you should inflict probability over dissent. They also concede our weighing argument that you should err and egg on weighing because they were shifting cross-examination. You shouldn't reward that because it decks all negative preference strategy. Extinction outweighs. Counterplan not needs their offense. Vote neg on risk of net benefit.
Okay. 136. So correct. Wait, the case, the counterplane briefly, I guess, the disset. Yeah. Counterpoint. Dissent. Cool.
Standardized tests are biased and prevent minorities from accessing higher education. The impact of cycles of inequality and earning disparities. They've conceded that the SAT uses biased sections to rely on white experience of vocabulary, which is inaccessible. Eurocentric doesn't reflect other cultures. Things like reading comprehension sections on the SAT or grammar sections on the ACT are all causes to all the impacts of the affirmative that the counterpoint does not resolve. Now, the counterpoint calls for one permutation, and if we win that, there's a low enough risk of the dissent, then you can vote on the permutation because the all cause of standardized testing that they don't resolve is sufficient to vote affirmative. The dissent. First argument that should frame your debate, that should frame the dissent debate, is that they've dropped the very last argument that I made at the end of the 1 year, that you should vote affirmative on strength of link. The entirety of the advantage is dropped, which means that we are 100% solving that impact. But if we have sufficient defense on the dissent, then that's a reason as to why you should vote on the permutation to the permutation to the counterpoint, or on just the case proper. Their impact link doesn't matter if I win. There's no internal link to the war, food insecurity, or cooking, or all factors check. The argument I'm going for is that other countries check, and so does tech innovation. Other countries check. They're the exporters of rice and grain. They haven't told you what kind of food the United States exports. Look, for all we know, the United States just exports things like tobacco, which is not food, which is not food. But the 1 year said that other countries are the ones that export things like rice from like East Asia or Africa, etc., which means that you should err towards the affirmative on this question. Their flowers evidence internal link turns the dissent, and is a reason to vote affirmative. The warrant within their flowers evidence is that the United States is a leader in agricultural science, and these innovations flow from here to the rest of the world, i.e. other countries, third world countries. This is a reason as to why the United States needs to lead agricultural science, so farmers in poor countries can do more with less. You should ask yourself, where does this agricultural science happen? This agricultural science happens in larger tech companies and innovation, and as a result of innovation that happens as a result of people from the rural areas going to college and then graduating with more education, which means that the industry is where tech education happens. Internal link turns all this stuff about like other countries, because the other countries are where the majority of food growth happens. And if we're winning that the United States, or if the plan improves agricultural science, and that's a reason as to why it'll flow to other countries, third world countries that grow things like rice and grain, etc. And it is a reason to vote affirmative because it leads to an increase of food exportation from those countries, which results in impact industries, tech companies with college education students. Our seed stock evidence also supports this because it talks about how urban agriculture and small startup farmers enter the field, and they do things like innovate. They do things in order to innovate, in order to make it more viable in urban areas where they don't have a lot of land, which makes things like land use more efficient, especially in places like Africa, where as a result of desertification, there's a lot of challenges in order to grow food security. It also specifically talks about how obstacles to growing food and food exportation are fading as well. Technology improves. Here's how you should frame the dissent debate. All of their flowers evidence and stuff about how other countries check. They don't have any evidence on this, and our evidence says that their flowers evidence talks about how the United States leads to agricultural science. The affirmative is key to agricultural science because it leads to more college-educated students going into those companies, getting more jobs, which is like 1AC carnival evidence, which will lead to that of being exported over to poorer countries where they'll produce more food and resolve their impact. Strength of link also means that the advantage drop and the risk of this defense on the dissent is sufficient to vote affirmative.